Okay, in this section we discuss about solving radical equations. What is a radical equation? Radical equation is an equation that contains at least one or more radicals. Let me give you an example of a few radical equation. That's the simplest one. You can also have something like this. That's a radical equation. So as long as your equation contains at least one radical, that's called a radical equation. So I should have written that up there. Now to solve a radical equation, follow these three steps. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to isolate the radical. Isolate the radical. And I will show you what this means. The second thing we do is we're going to square or cube or raise both sides to the fourth power. So square or cube, usually it's just going to be square or cube, both sides. And then we must solve and check our solution. Check our solution. Okay? So here's our first example of a radical equation. To solve it means to find a value that makes this equation true. So I'm going to start out by isolating the radical. To isolate the radical means that there should be nothing next to the radical. This radical happens to already be isolated, but if I were to work on problem number 2, then this radical is not, because there is a -1 next to it and also a multiplication of 2. Okay, so if you don't notice that you don't see anything that's plus or minus next to this radical, is by itself on the left side of the equation. It's already isolated. I can now move to step 2, which tells us to square both sides or cube both sides. Because we see a square root, we square both sides. So I'm going to square both sides. When you square this side, we use the property of radical regarding square, and if you remember, the radical goes away. So when you square the left side, you get 2x minus 1. This gives you 9. Add 1 to both sides, 2x equals to 10. Therefore, x equals to 5. We solve. Now we check our solution. We do it in our head. Plug 5 in here. That gives you 10. 10 take away 1 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. So that worked. So we box it. That's our answer. Let's move on to the next question. To solve, we have to isolate the radical. That is the first step. We do that by adding 1 to both sides. Bring this to 4, and then you have 2, the cube root of x. Now, if you divide both sides by 2, then you can get the cube root of x equals to 2. Now, we have isolated the radical. Go ahead and cube both sides. Raise that to the third power. It becomes 8. The rule says we get x. X equals to 8. Check our solution. Plug 8 in there. That gives you 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 take away 1 is 3. That works out. That's our solution. We are done. All right, number 3. This is the radical. We got to isolate this radical. We begin by subtracting 3x to both sides. Okay, that brings it to 2 minus 3x minus 5 root x. The radical is isolated. You can have a number being multiplied to the radical and consider the radical being isolated. This is okay, as long as there's nothing add, plus, or minus next to the radical. So what we do is we're going to go ahead and square both sides now. Square that side, square this side. Okay? When you square this side, you get 25x. When you square this side, you have to FOIL. So if you FOIL, you get 2 minus 3x times 2 minus 3x. When you do this right, you get 2 times 2 is 4. That becomes negative 6x. That also becomes negative 6x. And that becomes 9x squared. Okay? So when you get down to a quadratic equation, if you get an x squared, it implies a quadratic equation. What you want to do is you want to set it equal to 0. So set it equal to 0. 9x squared. This becomes negative 12x. You do have to subtract 25x to both sides, and then a plus 4. So you have 9x squared. This becomes minus 37x plus 4. And then this becomes 9 times 4. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so then you have to try to factor this problem. And if we try to factor this problem, we're looking for use Xbox 30. 9 times 4 is 36. Negative 37 goes up here. What two numbers multiply together give us positive 36, but when added together give us negative 37. These are the two numbers. So we go back here and we replace the 37, and then we factor by grouping. So you can take out a 9x, x minus 4. You can take out a minus 1, x minus 4, okay? So then you have 9x minus 1 followed by x minus 4 equals to 0. So let me finish this problem over here. Here's what we have. So then you take each factor and you set it equal to 0. If you take this factor and you set it equal to 0, that means x equals to 4. So that's one possible solution. And if you take this factor and you set it equal to 0, you get x equals to 1 over 9. That's another possible solution. So what you have to do next is you have to plug it in and check the solution. So let's plug 4 in first, because that's the easiest. So 3 times, right here, 3 times 4 minus 5 times the square root of 4 equals to 2. 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10. 12 minus 10 is 2. So that's a solution. But if you check 1 over 9, it turns out that 1 over 9 is not a solution. So therefore, you throw this away. So answer is just x equals to 4. So check that, and then you're going to see that that's not a solution. Okay? All right. This is our last problem. This is a problem where you see two radicals, so you begin by isolating one of the two radicals. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the right, so then you have 7 minus root x. Square both sides now. Okay. Becomes x minus 7, and then when you square this side, you have to FOIL, so you have 7 minus root x times 7 minus root x. This becomes 49 minus 7 root x, another 7 root x. That becomes positive x. So you have x minus 7. So what do we have here? We have, if you look carefully, the x is going to go away when you subtract the x to both sides. You have 7, and then you subtract 49 over here. That gives you 38. 49 minus 7. I'm sorry, that gives you... actually, you should be adding, because when you subtract 49, that becomes an addition problem. So then you would be adding it, and then that gives you 56. So negative 56, okay? So subtract 49 to both sides. Subtract x to both sides. X goes away. Over here we have minus 14 rad x left. And then what we're going to do here is we are going to divide both sides by 14, because we can. If we do divide both sides by 14, we get 4 over here. So you have 4 equals root x. So we isolated, well, there's two radicals. We isolated one of the two radicals, square both sides, and that allows us to get rid of the radical here. But then we're also stuck with a second radical. We're also stuck with the second radical. And now it's time for us to get rid of the radical here. So the way how we do that is we, once again, square both sides again. And that allows that radical to go away. Therefore, x equals to 16. So once we found 16, it's time for us to check our solution by plugging it in here. So when we plug it in, we get 16 minus 7 plus 16 equals to 7. So 16 minus 7 is 16 minus 7 is going to be 9. okay? And then this is 16. And as you can see, 3 plus 4 is 7, so that is true. Therefore, x equals to 16 is our answer.